There are those who speak and those who listen. But every so often, someone shows up who does both with uncommon purpose and an open notebook in hand. Nicole Banks is a power connector, a woman whose network doesn't just span industries, it sparks movements. For more than 2 decades, she's solved problems others run from, built what others said couldn't be done, and highlighted the wisdom of giants, one page at a time. This is Nicole's Business Notebook, a curated circle of brilliance, a behind-the-scenes pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets shared by the experts she calls friends. It's not just a show, it's a blueprint for those bold enough to build. So settle in, because the notebook is open.
Hi, it's Nicole Banks with Nicole's Business Notebook. Today we're going to have Bob Thompson on, and he is a premier real estate agent from Virginia. He is passionate about real estate in general and all aspects of it, but also the coaching and business side. So we're excited to get to know more about Bob, what he does, how he does it, and how he's the un-real estate agent. So Bob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
100%. So let's jump right in. I obviously know a bit about your personal story, but for those that don't, you weren't always a real estate agent. So let's start with a quick breakdown of who you are, what you're about, what your previous experience is, and how you got into real estate.
Okay, so prior to real estate, I was a chemist, actually, at a large chemical plant. And I started buying rental property probably around 2004, 2005, got my real estate license. My ex-wife and I put together a 3-year plan to get out of the chemist job completely and full-time into real estate. I was able to get that done in 2007, and I was able to walk away in April of 2007 and go into real estate full-time in the middle of a recession, and started to transform my business in 2008 onward. Some of the major highlights would be obviously leading the power team that I was on. I went independent in 2011. I have spent a lot of time focusing on short sales and bank-owned properties over the years. In addition, in 2017, I did 70 deals as a solo agent. And in 2018, it all came crashing down. I had 2 heart attacks and a quadruple bypass. And by the end of 2018, I had my credit card taken, my checking account canceled, and my car repoed all in one shot, and I was flat broke. So at that point, I had to rebuild my career, rebuild my life, and get back on top where I needed to be.
I love that. Obviously a sign of resilience and, working in different industries to get where you are now. So I love that. So let's start, this 3-year plan that you were able to do in one. Why was it so important for you to have a plan before you transitioned?
Well, basically what it came down to is I was making about 45 grand a year, which again, you figure for 2005, I was decent money. Wasn't gonna, wasn't millionaire status in any way, shape, or form, but it was good money. But we also realized that if I was going to do real estate full time, we had to be ready for the highs and lows. We didn't know what was going to happen, if I was going to be, as successful or at least make what I was making when I left the chemical plant. So the thought process was, and I preach this to everybody, if you have no debt, then you can make things happen a lot easier, a lot quicker, and a lot cheaper. So at the time we had, standard married life, 2 car payments, the whole 9 yards. So we paid all of that off. Again, we had a 3-year plan. We got it done in 2. So that way, at worst case scenario, if I only made 15, 20 grand, between what my wife was making, we could at least cover the mortgage, pay the small bills that we had, and survive. Wouldn't have been living great, but at least we could have been able to do it. And it came down to, okay, do you want me coming home after a 12-hour shift grumpy, or do you want me at least happy knowing that I'm working as hard as I can to get us back to our former spot?
I love that. Having a plan when that transition period hits, I think is crucial for success and really having the bandwidth to put everything into what you're trying to grow. So, being a new real estate agent, if you were to poof magic wand and you could tell yourself 3 different tips or tricks that would have made things so much easier for you, what would the magic wand have said?
The first one would have been that coaching is essential across the board. My first broker wasn't much of a real estate agent at all. He had money more than he had brains. And I realized that by the time I went to a proper team and got some proper training in January of 2008, I realized how little I did know. Yes, I knew the course. Yes, I could read a contract and all of that. Yes, I had owned rental property, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And proper coaching is what gave me the opportunity to move to the next spot. Number two, I think, is quite honestly is just belief in yourself that you're going to make this happen and you're going to be successful. And I think number three, quite honestly, is, and I say this all the time, don't tell anybody your business. The months going up to when I was leaving, I had so many people at the chemical plant tell me that I was insane. It was never going to be a success. I'm throwing away the best job I had ever had in life, and I wasn't going to be successful. So I think those are three key elements that even with my clients today, I preach, all of the time.
I love that. I think it really is about, growing in a point where you can be proud of yourself, where you don't need to sing it from the rooftops. And I know that we've talked about this, not everybody who listens is a fan or a supporter, and they could be divisive or, be jealous or not be supportive. And that may give influence to your decision where none's merited. So yeah, I definitely agree. Talking in the dark and, that whole process, at least to me, makes a lot of sense. So, you have had these, three, sort of things that you would like to tell your younger self. If you were starting over again, would you have done anything differently besides those three things?
First of all, that is a great question. I don't think I would have waited along. I was 35 when I went full time in real estate because I got into that mindset. And I think a lot of us are kind of given that mindset, which is, okay, find a job and you're done. That's it. You're not going to deviate from the job path or do what you really want to do, which younger me wasn't like that. Younger me played in a rock and roll band and tried to do stuff, but younger me also didn't have a whole lot of drive and or dedication. But once I found that drive and dedication, I realized that that's probably the biggest thing, is that I could have made that adjustment probably 4 or 5 years sooner. I just didn't know how to go about doing it. And you figure, obviously, this is essentially, realistically, this is pre-internet to some extent, to where I didn't quite understand that there were other people out there trying to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. So that would be the biggest thing. I wouldn't have waited till I was 35 to go full time in real estate.
I love that. Betting on yourself. And, the other thing is 35 really isn't that old. I mean, you are not even, halfway to retirement age by the time that we're going to be able to retire. So, yeah, I think, there's definitely still a lot of life left to live, at 35. And so, kind of to parallel what you're saying, not only start sooner, but even if it is 35, that's still okay. You got plenty of time to, make those changes and switch careers. So,
Definitely.
yeah. So, obviously you've dealt with a lot of clients in your time, 70 in one year, in addition to, all the clients that you've worked. If you could magically put in their brain one thing that would make your job easier to sell them a house, what would you magically poof into their brain?
I would say listen and pay attention to what I'm telling you. I think we all have a very bad habit of thinking that we know best. And I think it's important. What I like to say is learn from your betters. So, in other words, okay, yes, you want to listen to your father's advice. Okay, your father sold 3 houses in 30 years. I've sold hundreds on top of hundreds of houses in my 20 plus year career. So clearly I know best. Much like if there's something wrong with my car, I'm not going to argue with my mechanic. Now, I am going to call my father, because if my father can't fix it, it isn't broke. But I'm going to get that second opinion from my dad.
Right.
But I'm not going to argue with my mechanic because I can't fix it. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that and if you're getting a good recommendation and a referral, there's a reason for that. If everybody's telling you this agent is great, this mechanic is great, this plumber is great, this person is great, there's truth to that. They are great. So listen and pay attention, and let's go on the ride.
I love that. So, with the upturns and downturns and tariffs and all of those things, are current events affecting real estate in your eyes in Virginia?
I don't believe so, but I also have a tendency to believe that most of what gets put in our faces as clickbait comes and goes very quickly. Real estate, whether anybody likes it or not, ties into probably 90% of the industries in this country, not to mention all of the ancillary industries that come off of it, whether it's cutting grass or a small class B contractor or any number of things that go along with that. People are always going to buy and sell the property. They're always going to want to either A, move into a bigger property, downsize, or quite honestly, if they're not ready to buy a property, the news is not going to convince them otherwise. It all depends on where you are in your life at that time. And every state is different. There are pockets in every state that aren't selling that great right now for whatever reason. And then there's pockets that are doing well. That's just the ebb and flow of life and business in general, as far as I'm concerned.
I love that. So let's talk about, real estate, agents, who are just starting out, who are fresh, behind the gills. They've maybe sold one or two houses, but, they aren't getting the support from their brokerage. What advice would you give them to help them to kind of move forward and really make real estate a career?
I would say two things. Number one, and I preach this to all of my coaching clients, is lean into who you are. There is no one cookie cutter way to do this. There are many ways to do it. And if you are a person who is strong in social media, then run with social media. If you're okay with making phone calls and all of that, go that direction. But lean into who you are, what your personality is. That means more than anything. And we are not always going to be everybody's cup of tea, and there's nothing wrong with that. Number two, again, I'll say it again, as somebody that's learned the hard way, and quite honestly is quite proud of the fact that they do it now. And I think coaching is important. I had a conversation today with some of my newer agents. It's not about buying leads and things of that nature. It's about, are you getting coached properly? So if you do get a lead, either a referral lead, sphere of influence, or God forbid you're paying for leads, are you able to talk to that lead properly and turn it into either a buy or a sell situation? That's where coaching comes in. I think it's super important. And I think a lot of agents either A, missed the boat on that, or B, have bought into the cookie cutter style that doesn't work.
I love that. So speaking of kind of being yourself, you've touted yourself as the unreal estate agent or the non-real estate agent. What does that mean, and why are you proud of that?
Okay, so I consider myself the anti-real estate agent and have for years. Why I am proud of that is I have managed to do things my way and been successful. And I have two things. My attitude has always been, at the end of the day, pay me and tell me I did a good job. That's all I care about. Case in point, I don't do signs in the yard. It's 2025. Nobody is buying your house because of the sign in the yard. The sign in the yard gives you the feeling that I am doing everything I can to sell your house, because 95% of what I do is not a physical job. It's in my brain. It's my years of experience. What I'm thinking about can sell this property and how we sell it, pricing it correctly. So I stand by that. The other thing is, I have my people in place to make sure that these tasks get completed. Same thing with closings. I have a great title company that does great work. I don't go to my closings because at the end of the day, it's a photo op. That's not helping you. It's not getting the job done. There's nothing that I can fix on the day of closing that myself or the title company shouldn't have been able to fix the week before. So it's not going to come up at closing. So again, it's a photo op. It's me sitting there for 30 minutes while you sign paperwork. That's not conductive. That's not getting anything done. So I think I have a tendency to be honest about that. And I tell my clients up front, and it works for me. You're going to see who I am, which is, we're going to go in. If I'm on the listing side, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is what the house is worth. And that's it. Let's get it done and move on. Again, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I'm okay with that. And I have been successful regardless of that.
No, I love that. And I think to your point, it's, finding the clients that work with the model that you work under, and so setting those expectations, being clear about what they can expect and what you will do, what you won't do, where you'll be, where you won't be, I think is definitely part of, the good customer journey. So you may not be there at the closing, but you made that very clear. There's no, oh wait, where's Bob? So I think when you're, doing things in a different model or different way, setting, and communicating those expectations, I think is really important. So, kind of going to it, you've obviously dealt with clients and done a lot of, real estate transactions in that respect, but you've also worked with investors and short sales, and other real estate transactions. So are those different for you than working with traditional clients?
Oh, most definitely. I think like if you're working with a bank owned, so let's say we're talking about foreclosed properties that the bank holds, they just want you to go in and get the task done. They don't really care about your opinion or what you think. So then you're more of a task rabbit, as I like to say, which is get in and get it done. That's all they care about it. And I think that's great. It's a great way to do things. Short sales are a bit of the same. You're negotiating with the bank, or more to the point, against the bank. And it's important to understand that you've really got to be supportive of your client, especially if they're dealing with a situation. Let's be honest, most short sales are caused by divorce and they're caused by job loss. So it's my job to advocate for my client and support my client and let them know this is not the end of the world. Yes, it is a serious setback. That being said, we can move forward through this. And I have had many clients that years later have been able to buy property again and move on with their life. It's just sometimes it's a part of life. So it's definitely a very different style. And then again, with investors, it's more about the numbers. At the end of the day, it's no fuss, no muss. This is what the house is worth. This is what we can get for it if we flip it and do X amount of work on it. This is the best way to go about it, and we're done. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think, that definitely can keep things interesting and, working with the different clients. For real estate agents, what advice would you give them for these alternative real estate transactions and being successful in them?
Again, I would go back to coaching and I would say learn about the different styles and make sure that it's something that you want to get into and understand that it takes time. I started short sales in 2008 when we were first doing them, and there was no blueprint. Now there's a blueprint for them. We understand how they work, and they're way different than they used to be. But also, don't be afraid if you get a short sale, reach out to another agent in your market and ask them the short sale and how to go about it, and try to learn from that agent and take that knowledge. The other thing is that a short sale is not an adversarial, position. Buyers and sellers in that position, the bank makes the final decision. So there is no real discussion about price point and trying to make X amount of dollars on the sale. So you can go about it a little bit different, and let's all work together to make this process happen. So the sellers can walk away with some dignity and the buyers can go forth and quite honestly get a bit of a deal on that particular property.
For sure. So, a few times now throughout the podcast and show you've, referenced the importance of having a coach, which, I couldn't agree more. So what makes your coaching different from other real estate coaches?
I'm going to say two things, and I have gotten flack for this before, and I don't really care. There's a lot of coaches in our industry that haven't sold a property in 15, 20 years. In other words, they've been on the sidelines the whole time. One of the things that I love at the company that I currently work for is that I am a boots on the ground agent. I am still selling property. Yes, I am also coaching without a doubt, but I still absolutely love what I do. So you're getting real world experience, real world time. And let's be honest, sometimes there's even real world mistakes that are made along the way. Less than 6 months ago, I forgot to list that the property had a microwave. So guess what? When the house sold, I had to go buy the new buyers a microwave. That's my fault. I take responsibility for it, and accidents happen. It's not the end of the world. That being said, I am in the trenches daily working just like they are, and I think that makes a big difference. Number two is I think a lot of coaching companies, they They're trying to be very formulaic, and my rule of thumb is let's lean into who you are. If you're a shy person, you're not going to cold call buyers and sellers. It's not going to work. You don't want to be on that phone. So let's eliminate that phone model completely. And on the other hand, if you have no problems being on the phone, then hey, we're going to teach you all about cold calling and how to do all of that. But again, we lean into what we do best and who we are as a person, and that will make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, as coaches, it's so important to find strengths, to develop them, to, mitigate against weakness and risk. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. As a genie with your magic wand, hope that every buyer would know when working with a real estate agent.
I think every buyer, as far as I'm concerned, and seller, quite honestly, they need to interview their agent. I mean, obviously, the lifeblood of my business is referrals and sphere of influence and all of that. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with sitting down and going, look, Bob, I know that so and so recommended you, but it's a good idea to, quite honestly, to have that question and answer period of, okay, how long have you been in the industry? What are your thoughts on this? And that works both ways because they give me an opportunity to kind of figure out where they are. And sometimes, it does happen. Sometimes it just may not be a good fit. And that's okay with that. There's plenty of business out there. But I would say without a doubt, interview your real estate agent and get a better understanding of what's important to them and how they're going to act. If you're a person that needs to have your hand held the entire process, then you need to figure out if that's the type of agent that you have, or do you have an agent that's going to be straightforward and say, we're going to do this, this, and this, and keep moving.
Okay, so the real estate agent is also interviewing the client. So what are 2 or 3 questions that you recommend that an agent ask a prospective buyer or seller to make sure that it's a good fit?
Realistically, on the seller side, I think the best question is, what do you think the house is worth? And it's a loaded question because I actually know what the house is worth, but I kind of want to get an idea if you A, think your house is made of gold, or B, you have a general understanding of what the market is, and or you're willing to listen. I mean, I have been on listing appointments that were finished and done inside of 3 minutes. Because if you tell me your house is worth 60 grand more than it is, and then you don't want to listen to my counter argument, well, then we're wasting our time. I'm going to just, have a nice day, go on, and then we'll move forward from there. Mm-hmm. On the buyer side, I think one of the important questions is, what is your time frame? What is their why? Like, my attitude has always been, I know I stole it from that the Storage Wars, but what is the wow factor? What are you looking for? I want to be able to find that magical home to where you're like, this is the one for me. We can't just do this half-ass. It doesn't work because it's one of the most important things you're going to do in your entire life, probably no more than 2 or 3 times. So it's got to be done right and for the right purpose.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So you're talking, for, interviewing the clients as being part of the process. What other things that real estate agents may not realize is part of that process of onboarding a prospective buyer or seller?
I think agents, especially new agents, that's the bigger aspect of that, is new agents have a tendency to jump right in and they're ready to list it automatically. Well, there's more to it than that. It's not done overnight, and you've got to make sure, is the house ready to sell? Does it still need repairs done or cleaned up? What is the game plan? Take your time and put a game plan together. At the end of the day, you are supposed to be running the show. You've hired me to sell your house or help you find a home, which means I am the expert. There's nothing that irritates me more than an agent, young or old, that acts like they're an order taker. This is not freaking Burger King. This is a freaking house. Put your foot down, make some decisions, help them along the way, and let's get this done.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So, new real estate agents, obviously have a steep learning curve. What different skills would benefit a new real estate agent, maybe from another industry? So obviously sales, but like what other skills would you say, hey, this would make a good real estate agent?
See, that's the thing. I don't think there's necessarily a template for that. And I say this because when I came in the industry, my broker, my big power team leader, when I joined him in 2008, literally had a bet with my coach at the time that I wasn't going to make it because of my attitude and the way I handled things. And granted, this is 2008, so it's a different time period. At the time, he was big on whatever the industry was doing. So he was like, well, you need to shave your goatee because people don't trust people with goatees and beards. I mean, literally, this is, and I basically looked him dead in the eye and I'm like, no, I'm not shaving my goatee. I'm going to do what I do. And that's ultimately what happened. And clearly I proved him wrong. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing is be coachable because there is no set pattern to it. I know people that are just as soft spoken as the day is long that are killing it. And I know people that I looked at them and thought they would be a massive success and they just have what it takes, or they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stick around when things got tough would be the answer for that, because it's not always easy. And when you're new, it takes a little while to find your niche, find what you're good at, and lean into your personality and be who you are.
I love that. So new real estate agents are, in some places a dime a dozen. And I know that you're really, big about doing things your own way. What advice would you give to a new real estate agent to not kind of get sucked into the corporate real estate side of things, but be their own agent?
Okay, first of all, don't buy leads. Leads are crap. They're not going to work. The best thing you can do is work on your sphere of influence, making sure that your CRM is correct. You've got some sort of social media plan going on. The biggest thing is lean into you and who you are. I've got a friend of mine or client of mine that is ex-Marine, and he's went and joined his local VFW. So he wants to give back in that regards. That makes perfect sense. That's part of who he is. He was overseas fighting for our country. So that's important to him. If I've got somebody that's, I don't know, let's say is really big into horse shows and things of that nature, like out Arizona way and Texas. Okay, well then get involved with that. You're already involved in it anyway. So it's just a matter of making your name. Here's what I will say that a lot of coaches do, which drives me up the wall, is you can't take a 19-year-old soft-spoken person and tell them to make 50 phone calls a day. It's not going to work. They can barely get on the phone to call a doctor, and granted that's a stereotype, but for a lot of people, they have trouble dealing with that. So I'm not going to ask that person to do that. Just because I can do it and always could doesn't mean anything. We have to lean in to what that person is. Are they golden with social media? Are they good at networking? Then get out there and networking. And even networking has its place to where sometimes it's age appropriate networking. I've been at networking events where it's all 20-year-olds and the music is pumping. And it's like, you know what? I'm 52 years of age. It's 9:00. I want to go to bed. I'm done.
Right. I've been there. I noticed it. I know that struggle. So when it comes to, new real estate agents, obviously, what I hear is you want them to be themselves. But, they're in a new industry and they're maybe uncertain about kind of the status quo and all of that. So, obviously you've treaded your own way, but how would you give somebody advice to do the same?
Again, I think it goes back to leaning into themselves and quite honestly, being coachable. That's 90, Lord knows that's all of it. And I'll give you a good example of that. When I first got, in 2008, when I joined the Big Power team, about a month into it, I'm arguing with my broker and team leader about a listing that I've got. And he's telling me it's overpriced, and I'm arguing with him. And he finally looks at me and goes, "Who's the expert and why are you arguing with me?" He's like, "My name is on the door. I'm the one that provides all of this. I am the success." And it, like the light came on. It was like, oh, good Lord, he's right. So there are people that are better than us, and we have to accept that, and we have to be willing to open our ears up and go, okay, I'm going to take this wisdom. I might shift it into my own personal direction, but I'm going to take their wisdom. And I think that's very important. And just don't get bogged down in the day-to-day. I mean, what I tell a lot of my new agents is that we have to count the small victories because it leads to big victories. And I'm all about that. And number two, don't compare, contrast, because everybody's situation is different. It takes a combination of hard work and dumb luck to be successful. whether anybody likes it or not. I mean, if I was a new agent and I was able to sell a house to a friend, and then all of his friends are at that same age group where they're all buying property, and I become the real estate agent for these people. Okay, well, that's wonderful. And at the same time, I could be an agent in a small part of the country that is struggling right now. We never want to compare or contrast. It doesn't work.
Right. I love that. So, I mean, getting straight down to it, you've been incredibly successful in your career. And I know that you had this one marquee year. How many homes did you sell that year?
I sold
70, 80?
in 2017. I sold 70 houses, and because I always like to laugh that somehow karma or whoever likes to smite thee when you get a little bit excited and cocky. In 2018, I had 2 heart attacks and a quadruple bypass. So I've had my highs and I've had my lows.
Yeah, for sure. So 70 houses is a ton. I mean, that's more than 5 a month. What did you learn during that crazy year of all that success?
Well, it kept building, so it would be like 45 the 2 years before, and then 55. Honestly, what I learned was don't overthink it. I mean, I just put my head down and worked. I didn't realize I had sold that many houses until I hit like October and November and started backtracking and looking. And I was like, good Lord, like where did the year go? I
Hmm.
was hustling and doing what I needed to do. And to be honest, again, that goes back to that hard work and blind luck. I had got into the foreclosures. The asset managers liked me. They knew I would get done what I needed to get done. So they kept, quite honestly calling me off the bench. Hey, Bob, we've got another listing for you. Hey, Bob, we've got another listing for you. So between that and all the regular stuff that I was doing, it just literally, I woke up like the middle of November and was like, holy cow, I got like 65 that have closed this year. And then, of course, I closed another 5. And, I was feeling pretty good about myself rolling into 2018, let me tell you.
Oh, for sure. So, with that success and that hustle, if you were to, go back and be able to whisper something in your own ear to help you through that time, what advice would you have given yourself at the end of that year?
At the end of the year, I would definitely say that I should have gotten an assistant at that point, or at least a TC, a transaction coordinator. Number two, I did not do a very good job with my CRM. So, like your KV cores and things of that nature that real estate agents should be using, that a lot of us that came in years ago, we were taught make the call, make the call, make the call. There was no law, at least our team leaders and power brokers didn't talk about the long-term longevity of making sure that your CRM is correct so you can continue to stay in touch with your past clients. Now, I've been blessed in that department and I've done well with that. But let's be honest, I know that there's people that I lost along the way because I didn't have somebody doing that. And I think that's why with, especially nowadays with the levels of automation that we have, as opposed to when I was coming up, it's out of control. And I think it's a great way to stay in touch. And of course, we have the TikToks and the Facebook and all the stuff. And I think all of that helps. But a good CRM is worth its weight in gold.
Yep, I definitely agree. I hate using it. I hate typing in it, but the benefits are definitely outweigh the monotony.
What I tell new agents is it's the unsexy piece of this job. It's as unfun as it can possibly get. The fun is in putting a deal together and showing property and negotiating. And for me now, it's coaching and seeing my agents succeed. It's not fun to sit there and work on your database. And I think we were all given the impression that it would be wonderful, and it's not. But it's one of those. It has to be done. No less than, you know what? Somebody's got to clean this house around here. And if I'm not paying anybody else to do it, I got to do it.
Right. No, 100%. So, networking is a component that real estate agents can use to be successful, but they should never introduce themselves as, hi, I'm a real estate agent. How would you recommend that a new agent get that confidence to start conversations and networking and introduce themselves?
I would say again, go back to find organizations that you want to be a part of, find groups that you feel like you fit into. Again, I've done the local stuff and it's the music's pumping and it's 9 o'clock and I'm ready to go home. But I've also found other organizations, like an organization that I'm proud to be a part of called Diverse Hampton Roads, to where it's more of a partnership. It's more of a, let's just have some grown up conversations and we're going to talk. And if real estate comes up, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So it's not about what can you do for me? What can you do for me? It's about being with my people, and it will naturally come from there ultimately at the end of the day. And even if it doesn't, we all know somebody that's going to need our services sooner or later. And we hope that they think highly enough of us to go, hey, you should go talk to Bob. Maybe he can help you with that problem.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you mentioned coaching, and you're doing that in addition to selling houses now. Have your mentees taught you anything in this journey?
Oh, without a doubt. If anything, I have gotten way better at keeping up with what's going on now, because I don't want to get into a position of do as I say, but not as I do. And the other thing is that there's a lot of coaches in this industry, and I'm just going to say it, haven't sold a house in 20 years and don't know what the hell they're doing. And they're basing it on 1,000-year-old platforms. Part of the joy that I get of still having both feet into the fire is that I'm putting deals together. So I'm up to date on what is going on. So I'm definitely learning from my new agents in terms of social media and things of that nature. And it's also very easy to get stuck in your head that, well, I've been doing it a certain way for 20 years, it must be the right way. So I'm getting better at stopping, stepping back and going, okay, let me hear this out. Then if it makes sense, go, oh, maybe I will add this into my repertoire or my box of tricks, because that box can only get bigger, and that's a good thing. So that they've helped me a lot on that. And one of the other things I've learned from even talking to other coaches is that, I have a tendency, I can be a bit sarcastic. And somebody pulled me aside and said, your words have meaning, and they're words of gold. So when you even jokingly bust somebody's chops, it's going to weigh more on your new person, because they don't know you well enough to know that either A, you're joking, or B, you're just being Bob. So it was like,
Right.
okay, I get that now. So I've had to temper that a little bit. And it was a valuable lesson learned. It wasn't a pull me aside thing, but it was a conversation I had with somebody I respected. And it was like, ooh, again, it was a light bulb moment. Like, these people, believe what I'm saying, which means I've got to believe it. And number three, I can't just be my usual, sarcastic self all of the time.
Right. No, 100%. Yeah, I think, for those that are, going through and being a mentor, it's definitely, sort of a mirror. You can see your strengths, you can see your weaknesses, and what's easily being taught and received, and, what your students are having issues with. So, with people coming to you, what do you bring to the table as a real estate coach?
Well, I think first of all, like most things, it's 80% listen and 20% talk. So I want to figure out where they're coming from. If let's say they've had a few years in the business and they're struggling. Okay, what are we struggling with? Let's talk about accountability. Sometimes it can be as simple as what's going on in their head that's preventing them from moving forward. The classic imposter syndrome, which I myself have dealt with. But the other thing is just a lot of it is call and response, which is, okay, I'm having issues with this. What do you think? Well, this is what I did at this time frame, and I think this might work. Or it's sitting back and learning that person. Okay, and case in point, we've had this recently on a group coaching, to where the client had another coach they had originally been dealing with, and again, her solution was, well, make 50 phone calls a day. And this is a individual that is just very nice, but quite honestly, very timid, wants to do well, will give excellent customer service, but is not going to make 50 phone calls to strangers every single day. It's not going to happen. So part of my job is to listen, pay attention to where they fit, where their personality is, and guide them in that direction to the best of my ability.
I love that. I love that you're not trying to mold yourself. You're trying to give them the tools that they need to be successful, even if it's not the same tools you use.
Yeah, because I grew up in the industry when it was, you need to do these 5 things, and these are the only 5 things that you can do. As I like to say, there are many paths to real estate success, and they all don't look alike. And anybody that's coaching you or telling you that you are is wrong. And I'll tell them that to their face. Whether it's, to be honest, whether it's the Tom Ferrys, the Brian Buffini's, the guys that have been spitting out the same BS for 20 years, I don't have time or patience for it.
I love that. And I think, to your point, finding, those students that want to make the best of themselves and, as you're trying to move them forward, interview them and really listen to see what their goals are is going to help them to get there. And that's obviously the coach of, being a coach or mentor, that's what you want to do. So that's amazing. Bob, thank you so much for your insights today, talking about real estate, talking about mentoring and coaching, the benefits there and how, new real estate agents could really benefit that. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Again, this is another episode of Nicole's Business Notebook, where we are breaking down the different industries throughout the greater Phoenix Valley and beyond so that we can all do better business together. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Nicole's Business Notebook. Subscribe and follow for more tips, insider secrets, and hard-earned wisdom so that we can all do better business together. See you next time.